This is Louie Zumbaugh with Rush Hour Ag. Leave your message after the tone.
Hey, Louie, it's Elliott Henderson. Can't wait to tell you about
rolling down the back road, truth riding with the dust, talking agriculture policy with people you can trust. From the field to the Capitol, we're breaking it down. Real talk, real issues from a real farm town. Every hour's rush hour when the work won't wait, so we're cutting through the noise and setting things straight.
What's your rush today, Elliott? Well, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Rush Hour Ag. I'm still down here in sunny Mission, Texas, while my co-host, Louie Zumbaugh, your host, and my co-host Elliott Henderson's up at Slater. And we got an exciting guest today. I'm not going to tell you who it is. Elliott's going to introduce him, but he does like old iron and kind of nostalgia, some things in farming. And I'm also like an old iron. I still have my dad's first new tractor, a Super 88 Oliver. I have my first new John Deere tractor, a 4455. I did buy a different brand new first, but I don't talk about it because it was a piece of work. And a few other things we can discuss if you want to hear about my old collection of stuff that we still use on the farm. So, Elliott, take it away.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't have a good collection, I guess, of old tractors yet, but maybe someday. Usually, the stuff I got, it can't collect dust too long. I guess it's gotta earn its own keep around my place. But yeah, I think today's guest, I have really been following this guy for quite a while, and I'd say he's probably one of my heroes when it comes to farm policy, and is not afraid to make sure that his voice is heard. And I think this message is really resonating with a lot of people. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce everybody to Mr. Ryan Kelly. He's a Wisconsin farmer and a content creator. He's known online as Wisconsin Titan 2.
Yep.
And that's where he shares his passion about tractors, farm equipment, and ag life. His content resonates with the audience who loves machinery, farming history, and the authentic rural life experience. Ryan, why don't you take it away and tell us about yourself?
Okay. Well, discussing topics of agriculture with these people, it's easy. No one ever disagrees with you. All farmers seem to get along quite well, and we're all on the same page together.
All right, the show's over.
Yeah. What more is there to say? No. I'm a small farmer. Up in my area, we're 45 minutes from downtown St. Paul, Minnesota. So it is cut up farms. Like after the George Floyd thing, there were people moving out even more than there were. I mean, like there's within 2 weeks of George Floyd, you could have a trailer house on 2 acres in the country and it was $300,000. Just, everybody wanted out of the cities. I was telling a buddy of mine this week, he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm feeling pretty concerned right now with everything going on in the cities." I said, "This time of year, I don't know if you're familiar with our geography, but the natural moat that protects us in the state of Wisconsin is freezing over right now." So
make their escape that much easier. Right?
Yeah. But yes, we're small farmer, but generally farms by us tend to be smaller. The big operators in our area are 3,000-4,000 tops.
Well, when you told me you were that close to the cities, when I hear Wisconsin, I think somewhere between Madison and Green Bay, not close to the same.
Right. Yeah. We're further west. If you went off of parallel longitudinal lines, we're further west than at least a third of Minnesota. So yeah, small farms, smaller fields. Typically we were dairy in our area. Our creamery is kind of nationwide known, Ellsworth Cooperative Creamery. But growing up, there always were cash grain operations. Just the Mississippi River is right there, so there's always been a market. But grew up dairy, hogs. I milk cows on my own. Got out of dairy, and I'm like, well, that was an easy decision when the RFS kind of started. That's when it became everybody was going to crop farm then. And, so 2008, started crop farming. Didn't have enough acres, between trucking and tiling. Did a lot of that. And, kind of here we are. And now I'm older and scratching my head going, where did we go so wrong?
Well, that's what, I really feel like this is going to be a real smash mouth episode with ag policy. And,
Yeah.
to me, you're like the dude that's bringing the attention to this stuff. And where did we go wrong? I mean, what are we going to do to fix this thing? What are you seeing that's wrong up where you're at right now?
Well, we might as well start. We'll just pick away at it.
Do it.
1031 land exchanges, the whole system is abused. If you're a guy, like say, if you're a farmer in this area, Des Moines catches you, right?
Sure.
They're literally, the city says, we want your land for housing development, industrial park, et cetera, right? You should have every right in the world to 1031 that land because you really don't want to quit farming. You don't want to sell your land, right? Seems just very reasonable that you should be able to 1031 your land to a farm somewhere else. What it should not do is you're a car dealer or a grocery store chain owner in Des Moines that wants to sell your business and you don't want to pay taxes. So you turn around and buy farms all over. That's an abuse of the system.
Well, I can think of something close to home for me where, guys are selling, this is decades ago, but selling rock quarries and buying farmland. And now they've got a tenant property where they had sold an enterprise before.
Well, and exactly. You've got non-like kind exchanges. 1031 should be a like kind. You sell a farm, you buy a farm. If you sell a rock quarry, go buy other land as a rock quarry, etc. The problem that this is leading to, like you just brought up, that's another big thing, the tenant-owned farmland, right? Or tenant-operated farmland. You have a lot of out-of-state investors that own this land now. So, yes, there's still the economic activity of farming going on in that community, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of cases, that operator might not even be local, because if it's a big enough, investor, he might have property all over, right? So he could get, there's guys that'll work with him. How many guys that farm 20,000 acres? Look at the distance geographically they cover.
Counties.
Right.
Counties.
So that land, that income from that land is leaving that community completely, whether it's through the operator of that farmland and certainly the owner investor. That income, his rent income, is not getting spent in that community. It's leaving that area. So when you had this small farm that got bought up by this bigger one, he shopped at the hardware store. He shopped at the implement dealer. He shopped at the feed store.
The deposits were made at the bank on Main Street.
Right.
It's not happening anymore. The equity's not here.
Yep. So you completely pulled this farm out of the, completely out of the area, but yet you still need the roads and the infrastructure for that, which you're getting some of that back in property taxes. But why on earth should that be taxed as an agricultural property when it's not?
I think it's
It's an investment.
It's a commerce property.
Absolutely.
It's for commerce. And I do think there is some discussion around addressing this issue, at least here in Iowa, Louie, where, we've got several gubernatorial candidates now talking about trying to make some change with this.
Well, that doesn't matter if it's against the Constitution of Iowa. If you're referring to the property taxes, them separate, so they can talk about all they want. You can talk about whatever you want. And a prime example is talking about Chinese-owned farm ground in Iowa. Well, we can't allow that. Well, it hasn't been allowed since 1980 something. It's just a good tagline and a good. They think it's a good promotion for themselves. I know, Elliott, you pointed it out on their Facebook page one day. I happened to see your comment to him that, this hasn't happened since the 80s, so why don't you knock it off? But I think, for me, I understand what you're saying to a certain point. But I know of farms that the parents died. The children don't live in Iowa, but they inherited that farm. They rent it back to the farmers from Iowa. I don't think that they should have to pay anything higher. I mean, for being descendants of their farmland owned parents. I just think, but I do understand what you're saying. If it's and I don't know who to think of to start with, but just a big company, a man that owns a big company somewhere makes a lot of money. I know one, Morton Buildings, that they've had ancestors come in here and I shouldn't say ancestors, but family members come around buying land around Manchester and Cedar Rapids. whatnot, So there's an example of, I think, where you guys are saying there's a difference there, but I don't know how you legislate the differences, if that makes sense.
Well, I think any absentee land ownership should be handled completely different, because in that case, you're saying they were family members that own that farm together out of state, but at least there's a local guy running it, which, okay, that's good. So you're getting half of the equation there, but the family members are still taking that income that they're getting in rent.
Sure.
And I don't think, especially like in my state of Wisconsin, we have what's called use value assessment. So if you're a hunter or something, or say you like riding horses or dirt bikes, right?
Yep.
So you buy a piece of land and it just becomes a spot to screw around and play, right? You're taxed very differently than a guy farming, because the whole point of the farmland is they realize you're not making the income off of farming the way, say, another property would, but you're also generating an income for that community instead of just being a recreational spot. So they tax farmland different. But if you're not an owner operator of that farmland, especially if you're out of state, any absentee land ownership should be somewhat frowned upon. And I think that gets back to the root of a lot of our problems in agriculture. And I say this all the time. I'm a guy that has 90% of my net worth, or 80% of it, tied up in farm real estate. And I'm telling you, farmland's too high. And I'm not saying that because I want to buy more farmland. I'm saying that because they keep saying we need young people in agriculture. They keep saying we don't have enough beef. We need beef operators. 80-year-old guys don't want to raise beef anymore. You need young guys that can do it. Well, the young guy can't buy a farm. So when you're driving those property values up, if you take away that incentive to be, an outside investor in ag, values will come down. Because take, for instance, I always say when I was a kid growing up, farmland hit $1,000 an acre again. It hit it late 70s. It came back around when I graduated high school in 1996. So in 1996, that land was renting for approximately 5% of the value of the farmland. Today, if you take the rent and compare it, it's like 2.5%. So the value of that farmland is no longer tied to its production. It's now become an investment class. It's become
store wealth.
No, I disagree with you. It's still tied to the production. It's just that there's producers that are willing to do it for a lot less money because they're doing it on such a big. Well, now here's where I'm going to tie into being somewhat on your side, because they're doing it in such a large scale. They can afford to make far less. No different than Wendell Murphy. You know who Wendell Murphy was?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yep. He owned all the hog operations.
I don't know.
Well, he owned all the hog operations in North Carolina. He was a big North Carolina hog farmer. And
he was the start of the integration.
Okay.
He was the one that set up the model of.
Yep. So when I got out of hogs in 1998, because I'd lost my rear end in 96, made it all back and then some in 97, lost my butt again in 98.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, everybody said you had to be more efficient. Well, I could raise a pig just as cheap as Wendell Murphy could. It's just in my big year, I raised 4,500 out in open sheds and had to work your butt off, and he was raising $1 million. So, I was making 4,500. If we all made $1 a pig, I was making $4,500 a year. It wasn't worth it, but he was still making 4.5 million.
I mean, whether it's the Wendell Murphys or the Boswells out in California, these guys are probably on an individual level dictating policy. And when it comes to like this ag land thing, you talk about the income off that land and the return. But what about the programs that exist today, whether it's crop insurance or direct payments, that are artificially creating that value of that land to be higher? It's no longer the risk that you're willing to take in owning that land. There are these protections that continue to drive it higher and then wall off the next generation from getting it. And I guess that's where my passion for change is really inspired by that. I just see the next generation is at a disadvantage to where the generation or 2 generations before me were able to get to farm.
But that's what you don't get, Elliott. Farm, or maybe you do, but I don't think you do sometimes. Farming was never easy. There ain't a farm I ever bought that made it on the day I bought it. They were all underwater the day I bought them. And who's to say 20 years from now, land's not going to be worth $50,000 an acre or 60 or 100, or we have a drastic something happen.
The problem with 25 is that wages have not kept up with the inflation. And there has always been a time where you could, take a bite of the elephant and devour whatever challenge was in front of you. Today, you can't work the job running the maintainer on the secondary roads crew or the chipping and grinding job at John Deere and secure these land assets. These land assets have inflated so high that they're unattainable to the working class anymore.
Well, most of the people running a maintainer or working at John Deere aren't really interested in farming anymore anyway.
That's probably not fair. That's not true.
No.
I think a lot of these young people, whether they're running the sprayer at the co-op, they'd love the opportunity to farm. It's just not, they're not going to be able to do it on those wages.
Well, and to counter your point, talking about guys are willing to do it for less, I'm saying the exact opposite of that, because I'm saying the rent has not kept up to the value of the land. So the rent is only 2.5% to the value of the land. So the investor is actually taking less return for their investment than the guy that was buying land for $1,000 an acre and getting a 5% return. So whether or not they've got the operator that is willing to run it for whatever their cash rent number is, that's regardless. We've now just diverted away from asset value.
I think there's a quote that I've said before on here, and it's something like, in the absence of risk, the value of that investment is
100%.
greater. So there again, we have these investments, whether it's land, the value went up because the risk is less. We've got all these package protection programs through the United States government that make your risk to invest in ag real estate less.
Why is John Deere and Ford Motor Company stock considerably higher than, say, Tanner starts up a new startup?
Risk.
Absolutely, 100%. Tanner wants to get $4 a share to start his new company. Deere hasn't traded at $4 in a long time, right? Because you're like, it's a blue chip stock. The asset value alone that the company has would cover a percentage of the stock value, et cetera.
By the way, the government's writing checks to farmers and they're spending dollars on tractors. Ain't nobody spending my tax dollars on the things Tanner's selling.
Right. And that's where I think, and we've created this network. I keep hearing people say, like, equipment, using John Deere as an example, equipment's gotten too expensive. Nobody can afford to buy this new combine. Unfortunately, there are, because you've got the young guy that's starting out, trying, scraping and clawing on tiny margins, trying to get started with junk equipment. And then you have guys that own a lot of ground, paid for ground, that just need a write-off. So they'll buy that new combine regardless. I know guys like that. I know a guy that made a big real estate transaction, had to hide money. He was buying a new combine just to getting rid of the last new combine, just for somewhere to go with that money. That's why these equipment values are staying up, because you've got this divide now in ag where you've got, the peasants that don't have it, and then you've got the nobility that have it all. I mean, there's guys that are literally bulletproof.
Well, that's what I see, and Louie, we're talking about absentee land ownership, and is it right or wrong to have a different rate for the people that are no longer present in agriculture? If we continue down this path, you brought up noble class and peasants, and it's like, I just continue to see that we're going to end up with property that doesn't change hands anymore and just stays in a family, and that becomes that family. If they're wealthy and they hold on to that land, they're going to be a noble class, and the folks that can't afford to get into farming are just going to become a peasant class. And you bring on autonomy, and the thing gets really ugly fast.
It gets terrible. And I think what a lot of farmers that are very digging their heels, my family built this is my birthright, et cetera, that get that attitude, I'm going to continue to grow regardless of what anybody says. unfortunately, that for them, history tells us and our Constitution tells us that as there's less of you, you're outnumbered. So I was looking up this morning, since 1976, 50 years, we've added another 50% to our population since 1976. How many less farms are there today than there were in 1976? Now, theoretically, if you didn't know anything about agriculture and you said your population is going to increase, 50%, and the people that feed your population, how many more of them are you going to need? Most people would say, well, you're going to end up needing 50% more people to feed this. And it's like, well, in reality, we lost probably 60, 70% of those people to feed more. The power of the farmer, the Farm Bureau, you give it a couple more years or something, there will be no leverage in Congress, especially as you get these blue states, cities and that.
Mm-hmm.
They have more and more power as, the congressional districts and everything else. The Senate seats will take longer, but Congress, since it's due to population that they draw these districts, you're going to run out of rural people. And let's face it, the PR problem farmers have, when you have these farmers that are, driving around with an attitude of, I'm the BTO, look at me. There's a lot of bad blood. There's a ton of bad blood towards these guys. I see it online all the time. The BTO, I mean, they hate these people. Do you think when we're down to nothing but this last few farmers that anybody's there to protect them? No one cares. I saw, we talked about this. There was a video put on in Arkansas, because Arkansas obviously was a big topic this fall.
We had Adam Chappell on.
Yep. So this Arkansas farmer is driving around in his pickup, pointing out he's saying with all this consolidation, he's talking about seed, chemical, fertilizer, and equipment manufacturers have consolidated, which we know they have 100%. He says, this is terrible, all this consolidation. And he's driving through his town in a really nice new pickup, right? And talking about how bad it is. The guy that works at a factory can only dream of owning that pickup, right? And this guy's basically trying to defend the right why we need more handouts to keep this thing going. And he says, as he's driving through town, he goes, this was the hardware store, that was the cafe, the elementary school, and this is gone. He said there were 50 farmers. He said now there's just 5, and this guy is the next one to go. There's going to be 4, right? It's down, and now he's concerned about it. But you think when there was 50 and they got down to 25, they would have stopped and went, now, wait a minute, what are we doing? Instead, they're waited until it's too late. Do you think the people that are left in that town care about this guy? I mean, this is a dilapidated, Delta town. Are looking at this guy driving around a new pickup in front of his new house. They don't feel sorry for him.
Okay. Well, that's right. Are we getting near the end of the run of public support to make these subsidy payments and these bridge payments? I kind of feel like we're nearing the end of it.
You talk about them online, and boy, people, I mean, there's venom, genuine venom. I remember the first Trump trade war 10 years ago or whatever, reading on like New Ag Talk. And there were farmers that were like, well, they talked about it like they were fighting this trade war. Like I kept waiting. You'd go to the store, the truck stop, and there'd be a hat with like the scrambled eggs on the bill that says trade war veteran, and they were talking about, well, we're fighting this trade war. Like, these people better know what we're doing for them. And I'm like, you think the guy that works at the factory for $17 an hour feels sorry for somebody with a, multi-million-dollar net worth? They don't.
Well, I seen that. I was in Georgia here a couple of weeks ago, and we were sitting on the front porch one morning just drinking coffee, and we were kind of doing the math in our head, researching, how many taxpayers are in this country, and you divide that over $12 billion, and it's like $1.53 a week that every taxpayer has to pay just to cover this $12 billion bridge payment. Well, I had a comment on social media about that, and it's like, well, that's a good value, for cheap food. Yeah, but the taxpayer has already kicked in so many dollars, and they're already paying for this. So I don't know that, more money getting dumped in the system is a good thing. And I don't know if the public's going to have the tolerance for it anymore.
Well, I don't think there's any problem not having the bridge payments because in our case, the younger guys that farm with me, they'll get a little something. I'll get more, but the guy, there's guys out there that is there a cap on it or true cap? I don't think there is because you can have as many identities as you want anymore, the way I understand.
After the one big beautiful bill was just drafted, I think it kind of unwound a lot of these caps.
Yeah, I think going forward, I think eventually that we're going to end up, well, and we'll talk about this eventually, but I think the hog integrator thing, I think is the way we're going to go. We're basically going to do the work of, we're going to be guaranteed an income.
What's your vision for that? I think the listeners need to hear kind of how you think that could happen with row crop.
So I've always been, I guess when I was younger, I'd cuss the Chicago Board of Trade, right? Them jackasses, they stole this, 30 cents from us. I know I'm right. I know the yield wasn't there, et cetera, right? And
yeah, this is being taped after the WASI that came out on Monday. So
yep. And it's like when I was younger, I'd be like, they got it so wrong. And I'm like, they stole it from us, them. I don't know what kind of language you can have. Can you say bastards here?
Okay. You want.
Them bastards, stole it from us.
If you get too bad, we'll cut it out.
Well, I'm used to being on the Straightforward Farming podcast, and if you're not here and you're not.
You're brutally honest in your opinions.
Okay. All right. Well, you'd cuss the Board of Trade. As I got older, what I realized was that the Board of Trade was doing us a favor, because anybody that ever thought in the history of anything that thought they were bigger than the Board of Trade learned a very tough lesson, right? Like, look at Verisun and the ethanol deal. That was that shut them down, basically.
Who are them boys that tried to corner the silver market once? Same type of thing.
Yeah. So the Board of Trade kept everybody honest. So the livestock markets, for all practical purposes, the pork industry is 100% integrated at this point. There's a small fraction, but I didn't mean to hit your sprayer boom. If I said to somebody today, like, okay, so what's the price of hogs today? They give it, but does it even matter at this point, right? Because, it's all contract to speak of. So they locked that up. They're trying really, really hard with the dairy. The amount of dairy farms we've lost is
most of the people that are handling hogs today are just renting square footage.
Right.
They're not handling they're not owning hogs.
And the dairy, they're moving to these 100,000 cow dairies out in the Dakotas, Oklahoma, out in these western states, et cetera, because then they can concentrate all that in one spot. They're going to own that market. Older farmers, when I were growing up, they always talked about the wife. The wife her income came from eggs. The farm wife would have a chicken coop and they would sell eggs to the grocery store. Well, they integrated the chickens long time ago. Like if you called up, say Quick Star and said, I want to sell you guys chicken breasts from my poultry herd, they'd say, well, no, it's Golden Plump, Tyson, whoever, right? So that they've got the whole chickens, they got the pigs, they're going to have dairy here real quick, the way it looks. The last standouts are kind of the cow-calf thing, which put a pin in that one, because the real estate values will have an effect on that too.
Absolutely.
But the crops, the Board of Trade makes it so you can't manipulate that. But if you can get the production under your thumb, then you own the Board of Trade, because you have all the control. So you got farmers right now that are operating at a loss, multiple years, year after year, a loss, right? Why did all those farmers go to hog integration, just growing for, Iowa Pork or Christensen Farms, Smithfield, whoever, right? Because it was a steady, good income.
Took the risk out of it, right?
Took the risk out. So I think long term for the commodities, they're going to go, we'll provide you with the seed, chemical inputs. We'll finance all the inputs. They'll probably look at your farm. They have our data, and they'll say, okay, we'll give you X amount of dollars to operate this for us. Your equipment, your land, because it's too hard to buy all the land. But then you'll grow for this is what we'll do. And just like the hog thing, now I've heard the hog integrators, if you started a hog integrator in 99, boy, within like 3 years, the thing was paid for and they were cutting checks, right? Great deal. You had fertilizer for your corn and everything. From what I understand now, the math to build a hog barn and have it pay back, you're talking like 20, 25 years before you're really cutting a check from it. Because the rate didn't go up and keep up with the cost of construction. And let's face it, they have enough barns. They've got port under control, so they don't really have to bid it up because you've built the barn. If you build a barn on a 20-year payback and you sign a 5-year agreement, what do you do at the end of that 5 years when they say, well, we're going to lower the rate a little bit for you?
I have a lot of conversations with guys every year that, their barns are getting 10, 15 years old. And I know some friends of mine that have had barns sit for a summer, multiple turns. And boy, it's stressful for these guys.
And once they get, say, if you got 80% of the farmers, if you took the main corn belt areas and got those farmers to sign up, whether you're Cargill or ADM, et cetera, once you've got that, then you can manipulate the market all you want, because then these other guys the hanger-oners are going to kind of take the scraps.
Well, you brought it up there with food earlier, and it's like, we don't make all this food in this country. We import a ton of food now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing with this, vision of the land. As they get more and more control, they can go somewhere else and get the grain.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, the land, it might have to sit a few turns, just like the hog barns do today.
Well,
they don't want to own it. And
what a crime. There should be, and I gotta be careful with this, like talking about this, because I don't want to end up in a lawsuit, but there are co-ops and farm organizations in the United States financing the infrastructure in South America.
Sure.
And they're doing that with their patrons' equity. They're helping their competitors. And their point is, well, then we'll bring these guys into our co-op. And the bigger the co-op gets, the better for everybody. And we all know for a fact, the bigger the co-op gets, the worse it is for the individual members.
Well, I mean, that's happening with, I think, seed corn. And, we're paying what we're paying, but it's getting offered to another nation at a reduced rate.
Well, here's how a co-op works. I'm farming 500. You're farming 5,000. Tanner's farming 50,000. And we all go in and say, hey, I need a price on seed corn. There's going to be 3 different numbers, right? It shouldn't be, because it's a co-op. We're all members, and the same with, and these co-ops were involved in the seed production or that. Let's look at, so that we have all this corn production, and that was the big story in the WASD, was North Dakota kind of screwed it for everybody else, right? Because there was so much corn in North Dakota. Well, 30 years ago, if you'd have said, heck, I listened to a speech that Earl Butz gave, and he talked about how the Corn Belt doesn't go north of I-90. He said there's no corn north of I-90. And it's like, if you look at that, how did they get all that corn in North Dakota? Well, once corn became such a darling child of all the farm programs and the RFS and everything else, the incentive was to put that money and dollars into research into corn. I say all the time, like, and then you'll hear these guys say, like, I bring up oats. I'm an oat producer. And they'll say, well, we can't grow as good oats as Canada. That's why we don't grow them around here. And it's like, well, they didn't grow good corn in Canada, in North Dakota 30 years ago, but we made it so they could grow really good corn in North Dakota. If the RFS would have came out and the answer to all our ethanol was cotton, we'd be growing cotton up here.
Yeah.
I think crop insurance has a little bit to do with corn being growing all over as much as anything else, which goes back to what you guys said earlier.
Policy.
Yeah, it goes back to policy, but why wouldn't, if you can grow corn and get the ice states to basically cover your crop insurance because they don't collect near as much as they do in North Dakota or wherever, why not grow it? Well,
Well,
why not go clear down here in South Texas? And I'd still like to know how this works, how they can collect
Jake
every year. And
had a post yesterday, Louie, and I thought it was pretty cool because he was talking about how, as hard as it is to be profitable raising corn or soybeans in Illinois, he must be a fringe state now.
who's that?
His name's Shay Folks, and what is it? Their Ag Solutions, I think, is kind of who he's a member with there. But he had a comment, and it was about it, raising these crops is difficult, and it's difficult to be profitable. But it's more profitable in these fringe states now than it is in Illinois, where they can grow really good corn efficiently, or soybeans, whatever. But
I don't doubt that. I always wanted to, a number of years ago, move to northern Missouri. This was before all the genetics in corn. And I thought that was an opportunity because you could buy ground there for a little of nothing. But if you drive down 36 now, which is the highway that cuts across northern Missouri, northern Kansas, and look at all the grain setups that have been built in the last 20, 25 years. I'm not the only person that had that idea, but the genetics in corn have made it possible to, I doubt they're growing 250 bushel corn like we do, but they're growing 210. But also the price of ground has gone up there too now over the last few years.
I always remember growing up, my dad always told me, where there's risk, there's reward.
Yeah.
Well, we've gotten rid of the risk. And so now that there's no risk, there's no reward. And I do think we need disruption back in this environment. And like to Shay's point, like all the lack of risk has really disrupted the ability to be profitable in Illinois now.
Well, this farmer selling his 160 acres, land was always expensive. When I was starting on my own, it was too expensive too.
Mm-hmm.
So you buy the first 40 acres from this old farmer, and then you'd cash rent the rest of the ground from him because he wanted to sell the building site off because him and the wife were going to move to town. And so you'd buy that building site in 40 acres, and you'd rent the rest of the farm to help pay for that first 40 acres. And then down the road, you'd buy more land from him. But the rented land helped pay for the land you own. Some of these guys are renting ground and they just have enough owned land base that they're renting land at a loss to get the acres.
To justify the upgrade in equipment or
bigger combine, the whatever.
Well,
yeah.
I think this is a good place. This is a good place to probably wrap this episode up because it's obviously going to go into two parts, and we found that if we just ramble on for an hour, that people like a half-hour episode. So I think you're going to hang on here, and we're going to wrap this one up. I'd like to thank our faithful Rush listeners for tuning in, and I hope you tune in next week so we can get the second half of this here show because it's got a lot more to talk about. So thank you.